Welcome to EPG Pathshala. This is a module on language families as part of the course Introduction to Linguistics. I am your course teacher Anish Koshi for this course. I teach at the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. In this course, we would like to acquaint you with the concept of language families and also to the process of establishing genetic links between languages. You might be wondering why we talk of families in connection with languages. Actually, when we talk about language families, we as linguists are also making a claim that language is more than a means of communication. That language is something that goes through the stages of birth, growth and death like any other living organism. And the idea of language families is actually to trace the origins of languages and to look for ancestors if they are in multiples, or if possible to look for one common ancestor. Now, how did this story begin? How did we come about establishing genetic links between languages and talking about language families? We all know that the curiosity to know the origin of words has been there with all of us. We have always been surprised when we have seen that there are languages that our friends speak, where there are words which sound similar to the words in our languages and that they also sometimes mean the same. Well, in some ways, the story of historical linguistics, as we call this discipline in linguistics, begins in a similar vein. In 1786, or maybe a few years before that, William Jones, a British Orientalist who was working with the Royal Asiatic Society in Kolkata, got interested in studying Sanskrit. Sanskrit, the language of antiquity of India. Now, as part of a process of studying Sanskrit, what William Jones first did was what we all do when we want to see languages in comparison. He compared a few words that he picked up from Sanskrit, which he found to be similar to words in Greek and Latin. And what did he find? Well, you will also be surprised by what he actually found. What do you think William Jones found when he looked for such common words in these languages like brother, father and the like? Well, most of us, or at least some of us, would be aware that the word for brother, for example, in Sanskrit is bhratra. What do you think the word for bhratra is in Greek and Latin? The Greek word for bhratra is actually frater, and the Latin word for the same is frater. Similarly, the word for father, in Sanskrit, we call it as either pita or pitra. In Greek, the same word pitra appears as pater and in Latin as pater. Well, if this was just about nouns, what happens with adjectives then? Jones studied the word red or bloody, known in Sanskrit as rudhiras, and in Greek it appears as eruthras, and in Latin as ruba. What about numerals? The word for the numeral 10 is dasha or dasa, and in Greek it is deca, and in Latin it is decem. Well, William Jones is probably not the only one surprised now. As you hear these words, you would probably think these were words from very neighboring languages. Well, they're not geographically neighboring languages today, but they definitely must have some kind of a genetic relationship to have come about in such a fashion. In what is now a very famous address to the Royal Asiatic Society, in 1786, this is what William Jones had to say. The Sanskrit language, whatever be its antiquity, is of a wonderful structure, more perfect than the Greek, more copious than the Latin, and more exquisitely refined than either, yet bearing to both of them a stronger affinity, both in the roots of verbs and in the forms of grammar, than could possibly have been produced by accident. So strong indeed that no philologer could examine them all three without believing them to have sprung from some common source which perhaps no longer exists. Well, what William Jones was doing in 1786 was laying the foundation of what was to become the field of comparative historical linguistics. And what William Jones found was only the beginning. Linguists, philologers as they were called, and they're called historical linguists, started working on different aspects of comparative historical linguistics in this particular field, and came to establish a language family that we know today as the Indo-European family of languages. The amount of work that went into the study of Indo-European languages has surpassed the work that has been done in any other family till date. So that brings us to the question, are there other language families other than Indo-European family, or do all languages of the world belong to this one family? Well, as I said in the beginning, ideally we would like to go to a situation where all languages belonged to one common ancestor. But as of now, we've not been able to establish what that ancestor is, or where did the ancestors live, or the like. We have been able to establish many different language families. The largest language family in the world, as far as the number of speakers are concerned, is the one that was established first, that is the Indo-European family of languages, with roughly around 445 languages. How big is this family? Well, there are at least more than 1 billion people who speak one of the Indo-European languages as their mother tongues. It is estimated that roughly 45% of the world population speaks at least one of the Indo-European languages. Well, the Indo-European languages include languages like English, it includes Hindi, it includes Spanish, French, Russian, Bangla, and many more. And what is also more interesting is that this is the only family of languages which is spoken in all the continents of the world. Now, there are also other language families that have been established, but it has always been a constant challenge to establish language families, primarily because of two reasons. One, that linguists find it very difficult to agree on the total number of language families to be postulated on the one hand, and second, to decide which languages or how many languages should actually belong to each language family. Now, talking about other language families other than Indo-European family, as I said, the Indo-European family of languages is the largest as far as the speakers are concerned, but it is not the largest language family as far as the total number of languages included in the family is concerned. And that credit goes to a language family from sub-Saharan Africa called the Niger-Congo languages, which has roughly 1,545 languages included in it. Some of the other big language families of the world includes language families like Austronesian with more than 1,200 languages, Trans-New Guinea and Sino-Tibetan with again more than 450 languages. Of course, all language families are not this big, neither in terms of the number of speakers nor in terms of the number of languages that are included in them. And there are language families like the Yuka-Gir spoken in Russia and Zamukoan spoken in Paraguay, with just 2 or 3 languages that have been included as part of the family. Now, when we are talking about language families with just 2 or 3 languages in them, You must be wondering if it is also possible to have language families that have just one language in it. Well, that might be an unfortunate situation to land up in, but that is what we also have. And such language families are known as isolates or language isolates or isolated languages. These are language families wherein we just have one language. The reason for that being that it has been found increasingly very difficult to find other relatives of these languages or to relate these languages to other languages. You would be surprised, some of the very commonly known languages of the world like Korean and Japanese are actually language isolates, with linguists having no idea about any other relatives to these languages. Well, India is always a country that springs up surprises, and we shouldn't be surprised that we also have language isolates spoken in the Indian subcontinent as well. Talking of the Indian subcontinent, we have a language called Burushaski spoken in Pakistan, which is a language isolate, and in mainland India, in central India, we have a language called Nahali, which is also not related to any other language known to us. An important question as far as the field of historical linguistics itself is concerned is that what happens when we find language isolates? What do they do to our theory of language families? Now, on the one hand, we are trying to claim that we would like to see that all languages in the world are traced back to a common ancestor, and here we are faced with a situation where we have languages which can't even be related to any other language currently spoken in the world. Well, it does not really undermine our attempt to establish language families, because language isolates are definitely not languages which have had no ancestors. That is not the claim that we've made. What we've said about language isolates is that these are languages which cannot be related in their present state to any living languages or extinct languages that we know of, but these are definitely languages with ancestors, but ancestors that have been lost to us historically. Now, what is the situation with language families in South Asia or the Indian subcontinent as it is known as? Would you like to hazard a guess on how many languages are actually spoken just in India, leave alone the other countries in South Asia or Indian subcontinent? Well, according to the latest records we have from the Government of India, which is the 2001 census on languages, India is home 1,635 mother tongues. Of these, 22 languages are listed in the Indian Constitution in the Schedule 8 as official languages. Which language families do these languages in the subcontinent belong to? Well, the largest subgroup or family of languages in India is that of the Indo-European family, represented by the Indo-Aryan subgroup in the subcontinent. They are spoken in Pakistan, in Nepal, in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, in the northern, eastern and the western parts of India. Hindi belongs to the Indo-Aryan family, so do languages like Bangla, Odia, Marathi, Sindhi, Urdu, Sinhala and the like. As I said, in terms of the number of speakers, the Indo-Aryan subgroup is the largest subgroup of family as part of the Indo-European family in the Indian subcontinent. Even within India, of the 22 languages which are part of Schedule 8 of the Indian Constitution, 15 of these belong to the Indo-Aryan subgroup. The second largest language family in the Indian subcontinent is that of the Dravidian languages. What is interesting is that of all language families found in the Indian subcontinent, it is only the Dravidian languages which do not have relatives anywhere outside the subcontinent. Of the 22 scheduled languages in the Schedule 8 of the Indian Constitution, 4 languages from this family are represented, most of which are spoken in the south of India. Dravidian languages are represented in India by languages like Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada in the south, by Gondi and Gadaba in central India, by Khurukh and Malto in northern India, and by Brahui in Pakistan. The third language family represented in India is that of the Tibeto-Burman subgroup of the Sino-Tibetan languages. These languages are mostly spoken in the northeast of India, in the states of Nagaland, Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Assam, Sikkim and the others. Also in Jammu and Kashmir, the language Ladakhi is spoken in Jammu and Kashmir. This is the most diverse of the language families spoken in the subcontinent, with the largest number of mutually unintelligible languages represented as far as a language subgroup is concerned. The fourth language subgroup is that of Austroasiatic languages, represented by both the two major subgroups known in this language family. The Munda subgroup, spoken in the states of Jharkhand, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, etc. The Mon Khmer languages spoken in Meghalaya, and also the Nicobarese languages spoken in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Speaking of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, that is where the least known languages in the Indian subcontinent are found, spoken by the indigenous population of the Andaman Islands, the populations of the Great Andamanis, Sentinelese, Onges and Jaravas. It is not very clear if these four language groups are mutually intelligible or whether they belong to the same language family. Most preliminary reports show that there could be more than one language family represented in the Andaman Islands. Now let us get into the second aspect of this module. The first one was about family relationships, that we were looking at different kinds of language families found globally, found in different numbers, also looking into the language families that are found in the Indian subcontinent. Now let us look a little into how do we actually go about establishing family relationships. The first thing that linguists do when they want to do family relationships is to try to see which of the methods would be more appropriate. There are two major methods that are used in the establishing of family relationships among languages. One is known as the comparative reconstruction method and the other known as the internal reconstruction method. Let us first look into the comparative reconstruction method. The comparative reconstruction method begins very much like the way William Jones started his study of the words in Sanskrit, Greek and Latin. Yes, we look for words which have some kind of a resemblance as far as their pronunciation and meaning goes. And these kinds of words, of the kind that you saw earlier, brater, frater, desem and dasha, etc., are actually known as cognates. Cognates are words in two or more languages that share a sound meaning correspondence by virtue of having inherited the word from the same parent language. Examples are of the kind that we have already seen. Now, the underlying principle of a comparative reconstruction method is that it cannot be a matter of mere accident that you have different languages having words with the same kind of pronunciation and meaning existing. It cannot be an accident is an axiomatic thing in historical linguistics, and therefore reasons are sought as to why two languages have come to have words with sound meaning correspondences. Once such words are picked up, a list is made of them, and then the historical linguist goes about the next step in the comparative reconstruction method, which is about establishing sound correspondences. Establishing sound correspondences basically refers to what you would do if you come across two words like brater and frater, which would mean brother. You know that the bh in Sanskrit corresponds to the p in Greek, And so you will go about establishing more words which have the same kind of a bh relationship, with the meaning in both the words in the two languages remaining constant. Now, one has to be very careful when undertaking a comparative reconstruction method with cognates to not accidentally include borrowed words. Well, borrowed words will create a situation where you will have two languages which have words which have a sound meaning correspondence, but that shows no genetic relationship, because two languages unrelated to each other can both borrow a word from a same source language, and therefore linguists make sure that when they are comparing two languages in order to establish sound meaning correspondences, they do not include borrowed words. So what are the safe set of words to begin a comparative study? Well, we have a set of words which are called basic vocabulary items. Basic vocabulary items basically refer to items that refer to kinship, that could refer to lower numerals, words that refer to different body parts, and words that are usually found in the natural environment. So, words for say numerals like 1, 2, 3, words for body parts like hand, head and toe or legs, words for words that could be found in the natural surroundings like wood, sand or air, and words for kinship like father, mother, etc. The reason why linguists go for basic vocabulary items is because it is generally believed that every language would have had some need for these words, and therefore these words could not have been borrowed from another source. Now, when linguists work on establishing sound correspondences and when their study progresses, what you find is that a family is not a monolith. A family has its own internal regroupings, which in the linguistic literature is known as subgrouping. Subgrouping is a phenomenon that you find wherein some languages that belong to a language family show certain kind of grammatical and phonological features that they share with each other, but they do not share with the other languages of the family. In the context of subgrouping, we talk about the notions of shared innovation and shared retention. Shared retention basically refers to linguistic features that have been inherited from an ancestor, and that becomes the reason why daughter languages of the same parent come to share a particular linguistic feature. Well, that is not a very useful phenomenon when it comes to establishing language relationships, because or establishing subgroups within a language family, because these features are inherited from a parent and therefore they do not tell us much about why certain languages should be grouped together vis-a-vis some other languages that are grouped in another subgroup. Shared innovation, on the other hand, becomes a very useful tool for this purpose, because how do we get subgroups? If we ask the question, how do we come about getting subgroups, you'll realize that one of the daughter languages of the parent changes or innovates and becomes different from the remaining languages of the family, and this language then passes on these innovations and changes to the daughter languages, who then come to have it vis-a-vis the other languages of the family which do not have this feature. When you look at any language family representations, you will find how these subgroups are represented with a separate term. For example, when we were talking about the language families found in South Asia, we did refer to the languages spoken in the north and the west and the east of India as belonging to the Indo-Aryan subgroup of the Indo-European languages. What that means is that the Indo-Aryan subgroup, which includes languages like Hindi, Marathi, Bangla, Odia, they have come to share certain linguistic features that are not found in languages like English or French and the like, all of which belong to the same language family. Another example of subgrouping comes from the Dravidian languages, which are traditionally classified into South Dravidian 1, South Dravidian 2, South Central Dravidian, and the Northern Dravidian languages. One of the reasons why this classification has come about is because of the retention of an interrogative particle in the South Dravidian 1 languages ending in a or a o, which is not found in the other Dravidian languages because they have innovated and changed. The second method that we mentioned earlier, which is used for establishing family relationships, is the internal reconstruction method. This is the method that is usually employed when we are working with language isolates because we have no other language to compare it with. When working on the internal reconstruction method, linguists often resort to some of the more established linguistic principles like nasalization or intervocalic voicing, which are found in languages that are found around us. The principle underlying the internal reconstruction method being that if there is a linguistic principle which is in operation today, it must be in operation in the past as well. It is not a very easy process because there is nothing to compare to, but then when we have no options, we have to resort to the internal reconstruction method. The way we represent family relationships is in linguistics is the same as it is in biology in terms of family trees, and within the family tree, also known by its German word Stammbaum. And in the Stammbaum representation, we have a node which represents the parent node from which we have the daughter nodes, and the daughter nodes then separate out into multiple branches with each of the sub-parent node representing a subgroup in the process. Thus, to conclude, we can see that a study of family relationships and the establishment of genetic relationships between languages gives us great insights into the history of languages and provides useful insights not only to linguists but also to population geneticists, to evolutionary biologists, and to anthropologists, because it gives us clues on population migrations and also into the settlement patterns that human beings have gone through in their history. And it also, of course, provides us insights on the birth and death of languages. Thank you.